Resident Evil Village was a horror masterpiece with so many genres and ideas crammed into one game, and it guaranteed to have something to scare everyone. In this series, we'll be taking a look at the characters and creatures from the game and examine the history of some of the potential influences and inspirations behind the game.
Before we start, remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so that you can be the first to see when the next episode in the series goes live. This is Resident Evil Village, the tales behind the terror.
Werewolf. Noun. In folklore, a person who changes for periods of time into a wolf, typically when there is a full moon. Werewolf legends have existed for centuries, but gained most popularity around the Middle Ages. In fact, the term werewolf comes from werewolf, which was the Old English for man-wolf. It first appeared around 1,000 years ago in King Canut's ecclesiastical ordinances, and was originally meant to be a name to describe a wild criminal, and somewhere along the line it became a literal translation.
Medieval England wasn't the origin though. Many cultures before had spoken of the concept. They can also be known as the Greek lycanthrope, which also means wolf person, and from this they can simply be lycan as they are in Village. And the larger werewolves we encounter in the game, the Verkalac, translate to werewolf from Romanian.
Early werewolves weren't the violent, dangerous animals we know today. Instead, they were sympathetic creatures who suffered tragic curses. These werewolves still retained their humanity after their transformation, and most had human motivations for their escapades, usually revenge on those who cursed them. That all changed in the 1500s, with the rise of the witch trials. It was 1521 that saw the first person being accused of turning into a werewolf. From here, being accused of witchcraft, of turning into a werewolf, or being a vampire all went hand in hand, and communities feared these unknown monsters living among them.
Throughout history, there have been many explanations for what causes lycanthropy, the ability to transform into a wolf. Some say the transformation is temporary, whereas others say it's permanent. Some say the transformation is physical, whereas others say it's simply psychological. Some claim changes came after being bitten or scratched by another werewolf, or wearing the skin of a wolf. The Volsunga saga of Norse mythology tells us of Sigmund and Sinfjotli, who find two magic wolf pelts in a hut in the forest. Once they put them on, they are cursed to be wolves and can only remove the pelts on the 10th day. Eventually they escape and burn the pelts to free themselves and save others from coming across the curse.
In South America, there is the story of the Luison, which says the seventh son of a family of all boys will transform into a Luison on the night of a full moon, especially if it falls on a Friday. These origins lay in the Guarani history. They were the indigenous people of Paraguay whose mythology included 7 monsters, the 7th of which was Luison, which became the god of death. The Nagual is a Mexican version which remains in its original form to this day and hasn't been combined with European or any other versions of the legend. These stories do, however, vary from region to region, but some Mesoamerican Indians believe the Nagual is a guardian spirit that exists within an animal, whether that's a deer, jaguar, mountain lion, or just about anything really. In other regions, they believe that men can turn into animals for harmful reasons. Nagual originated from Nawali, which meant disguised, and the name alludes to the magic used to change their physical form to become an animal.
Other civilizations believe werewolves were created by curses, as in the case of Lycon, who slaughtered his son and served him to the gods for dinner. He was turned into a wolf by Zeus as punishment. In later years, people came to believe that those who were excommunicated by the Catholic Church would become werewolves too. This was backed up by stories of Christian saints transforming people into wolves as well. St. Patrick allegedly turned the Welsh king Vereticus into a wolf, while Natalis cursed an Irish family to be wolves for 7 years. These stories were seemingly backed up by the dictum of St. Thomas of Aquinas, which reads, Omnis angeli, boni et mali, ex virtute naturali habent potestatem transmutandi corpora nostra, which translates as all angels, good and bad, have the power of transmuting our bodies, and that was all the God-fearing people of the time needed to believe in them.
There were stories, though, of people who claimed they were werewolves for good reasons. In 1692, in Jurgensburg, a man named Theus testified under oath that he and other werewolves were the hounds of God, and claimed they were sent down into hell to battle the witches and demons. He claimed their work had prevented the devil from taking grain and failed crops down to hell. He claimed that there were werewolves also in Germany and Russia who did God's bidding and protected their homes from the devil. And when a werewolf died, their soul would be welcomed to heaven as reward for their service. He was sentenced to 10 lashes for idolatry and superstitious belief.
Other famous werewolves in history have appeared all around Europe. It was there that Pierre Berger and Michel Verdun had pledged allegiance to the devil and confessed to murdering multiple children. Gilles Garnier also murdered children and claimed to eat them too. Despite Garnier being sentenced a century later than Berger and Verdun, they all claimed to have an ointment that changed them into wolves to commit their crimes. All three were burned at the stake, as burning was considered one of the only ways to kill a werewolf. One of the other ways was a silver bullet, something we see in Village when we use the wolfsbane weapon, which is much more effective against the Verkalak than any other.
It's unknown whether these people were suffering from severe mental health conditions or were just cold-blooded killers. The truth will never be known. To the people of the time, they had to be monsters, because only something evil and demonic would be capable of such crimes. In late 15th and early 16th century France, Henry Boguet was a high-up official in France's justice system. History claimed he sentenced 600 people to death for being a werewolf. He himself had claimed he only ever condemned 80, but records show he only had around 30 people killed. However, Henry didn't discriminate. He once had a child executed because she enjoyed running around on all fours and pretending to be a wolf. She had allegedly attacked some other children, but it was unclear if that was true, as she was probably accused simply because she was poor. She wasn't the only child victim of the trials. Around Europe, not even children were safe from the accusations.
In 1725, a child known as Peter the Wild Boy was found naked and wandering around a German forest on all fours. He ate with his hands and couldn't speak except for grunts and growls, and people assumed he was a werewolf or maybe raised by wolves in the forest. Peter was eventually caught, more like hunted down, and captured. Shockingly, he was adopted by the court of King George I, and he was whisked off to England where he lived as their pet. He was used as a freak show and attracted crowds who were curious about him, and was forced into clothes which he hated. He also inspired the thinkers and philosophers of the time and became a massive subject of debate.
He was later passed into the care of a doctor who attempted to teach him how to speak. He learned his name and a few monosyllabic words. His caretakers passed him around throughout his life, but they always cared for him. He was described as exceedingly gentle in nature and particularly fond of gin, onions, and watching fires. He always enjoyed being outdoors, especially on starry nights, and in autumn would steal away to the woods and eat acorns. He lived into his early 70s.
Modern researchers have discovered that Peter probably had Pitt-Hopkins syndrome, a condition discovered in the 1970s that causes lack of speech, seizures, distinct facial features, difficulty breathing, and intellectual challenges. Modern research has also shown that the phenomena of werewolves being active around a full moon does have a kind of truth to it. A study conducted at Australia's Calvary Mater Newcastle Hospital revealed that the full moon really does have an effect on humans. The study found out of 91 violent acute behaviour incidents that happened between August 2008 and July 2009, 23% occurred while there was a full moon. Patients had attacked staff members with wolfish behaviour like scratching and biting. Other real-life medical conditions that can affect people and have contributed towards hysteria surrounding werewolves in the past include lycanthropy, which is a real psychological condition where people believe they are changing into a wolf or any other type of animal.
There's also rabies, which is a severe infection to the nerves and brain caused by a bite or scratch from an infected animal, usually a dog. This could even explain where the superstition of turning into a werewolf from a bite came from. Its symptoms include various effects which would lead people to suspect wolfish behaviour. Agitation, hyperactivity, excessive salivation, hallucinations, insomnia, and other horrendous things like vomiting, headaches, fever, partial paralysis, and more, all of which lead to death. And there's hypertrichosis, a rare genetic condition that causes excessive hair growth and could have led people to be mistaken as werewolves. This is a condition that may have likely inspired the early modern interpretations of the werewolf legend on the big screen with Universal's The Wolfman. It's also this design that is the most like the Lycans we see in Village. Normal people still dressed in normal clothes, but transformed into wild monsters.
Over the years, werewolves have proven popular in film, literature, and pop culture in general, with the condition being used as a lens to invoke both fear and sympathy. In Harry Potter, the character Remus Lupin is one of the most interesting and modern takes on lycanthropy. J.K. Rowling uses this condition as an allegory for HIV stigma. In the wizarding world, werewolves are shunned, mistreated, and fear people finding out about their condition. This was sadly very true during the 80s and 90s at the height of the AIDS crisis, in which gay men were demonised due to the stigma of HIV.
There are so many amazing werewolves within pop culture, especially in recent years with fresh takes on the genre in films like Ginger Snaps and Dog Soldiers. But of course, one of the most famous is An American Werewolf in London. This film gives us one of the greatest transformation scenes in history. Across the modern pop culture landscape of books, films, games, and even comics, werewolves remain some of the greatest creatures to ever exist, and their appearance in Village will definitely be remembered as a defining take on their lore.
If you like this episode, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you can be the first to see when the next episode in the series goes live. In episode 3, we'll be sinking our teeth into the possible inspirations behind the fabulously terrifying Lady Alcina Domitrescu and her 3 daughters, Bella, Cassandra, and Daniela.